Why do you feel more exhausted after an hour of scrolling than after an entire day of actual work? That question hits differently when you really sit with it. Because deep down, you already know something isn't adding up. You're not lifting weights, you're not running miles, you're not solving life or death problems, yet somehow your mind feels drained, foggy, and strangely disconnected. It's easy to label it as laziness or lack of discipline, but that explanation is shallow. What you're actually experiencing is something far more complex. Your brain is caught in a constant state of neurological friction, trying to reconcile ancient survival wiring with a modern world that never switches off. Your mind wasn't built for this kind of environment. For thousands of years, human beings operated in tight, predictable social circles. You knew your tribe. You recognized faces, voices, body language. Social interactions had context, meaning, and clear beginnings and endings. Now compare that to today. Hundreds of digital touchpoints, constant notifications, endless streams of information, and an invisible pressure to always be available. Your brain hasn't evolved fast enough to keep up with this shift, so it compensates the only way it knows how, by working harder. And that extra effort, that's where the exhaustion begins. Every notification, every message, every like or comment triggers a subtle stress response. It might feel insignificant in the moment, but your nervous system doesn't treat it that way. It reacts as if something demands your attention immediately. This repeated activation keeps your cortisol levels slightly elevated throughout the day. Not enough to send you into panic, but enough to prevent you from ever fully relaxing. It's like having a background alarm that never quite turns off. At the same time, your brain is chasing dopamine. Every scroll promises something new, something interesting, something rewarding. But here's the catch. The rewards are inconsistent. Sometimes you see something engaging, sometimes you don't. This unpredictability keeps you hooked, but it also drains you. Instead of feeling satisfied, your brain becomes fatigued from the constant cycle of anticipation and disappointment. This is what dopamine exhaustion feels like. Not a lack of stimulation, but too much of the wrong kind. And then there's the illusion of connection. You're talking to people, reacting to content, staying in touch, yet somehow you feel more isolated than ever. That's because your brain relies heavily on physical cues, eye contact, tone of voice, subtle shifts in expression, to process social interactions efficiently. When those cues are missing, your brain has to fill in the gaps. It starts making assumptions, interpreting text, analyzing tone where none exists. This requires more cognitive effort than face-to-face interaction, even though it seems easier on the surface. So instead of conserving energy, you're spending more of it trying to decode incomplete information. Multiply that by dozens or even hundreds of interactions a day, and you begin to understand why your mental battery feels constantly depleted. There's also a hidden cost to maintaining a digital identity. Every post, every message, every interaction carries a subtle layer of performance. You're not just communicating, you're presenting. You're thinking about how you come across, how others perceive you, whether your response is appropriate, engaging, or aligned with your image. This ongoing self-monitoring consumes mental resources, often without you even realizing it. At the same time, the boundaries that once protected your energy have disappeared. Work messages bleed into personal time. Social obligations follow you everywhere through your phone. There is no clear off switch anymore. Your brain, which evolved to operate in cycles of engagement and recovery, is now stuck in a loop of constant partial attention. This creates a state of low-level hypervigilance. You might not feel anxious in the traditional sense, but part of your mind is always on alert, waiting for the next interruption. That expectation alone is enough to disrupt deep focus and prevent true rest. Even when you're not actively using your phone, the possibility that something might happen keeps your system from fully powering down. Over time, This leads to a kind of emotional burnout that's hard to explain. You're tired, but not physically. You're overwhelmed, but you can't point to a single cause. You crave connection, yet social interaction feels draining. It's a paradox that defines modern life. But here's where the perspective needs to shift. The problem isn't that your social battery is broken, it's that it's being used in a way it was never designed for. What you're experiencing isn't a personal flaw, it's a biological mismatch. And this is where solitude comes in, not as something to avoid, but as something essential. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's not isolation in the negative sense. It's a state of low input where your brain can finally reset. When you step away from constant stimulation, your nervous system begins to regulate itself. Cortisol levels drop. Your mind stops scanning for new information. The noise fades, and something much more valuable takes its place: clarity. In these moments of intentional disconnection, your brain gets the opportunity to process what it has already absorbed. Emotions that were pushed aside start to surface and organize themselves. Thoughts that felt scattered begin to align. Memory consolidates. Creativity returns. This is not a luxury, it's maintenance. Think of it like this. Your brain is constantly taking in data, but without periods of low input, it never gets the chance to organize that data into something meaningful. You're consuming more than you can process, and the backlog creates mental fatigue. This is why even short periods of real solitude can feel surprisingly refreshing. Not scrolling alone, not distracted alone, but truly disconnected. No notifications, no external demands, no performance, just space. But creating that space in today's world requires intention. It doesn't happen naturally anymore. You have to build it. Start by becoming aware of your digital footprint. Not in terms of what you post, but in terms of what you consume. How often are you checking your phone without a clear reason? How many interactions are actually meaningful, and how many are just habitual? Awareness alone can begin to reduce unnecessary input. Then comes boundaries, and not the soft kind, the kind you actually enforce. Set specific times where you are completely unavailable. No messages, no scrolling, no passive consumption. At first, it might feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is a sign of how dependent your system has become on constant input. But if you stay consistent, your brain will adapt. You can also start shifting the quality of your interactions. Instead of dozens of low-impact digital exchanges, focus on fewer, more meaningful connections. Face-to-face conversations, voice calls, shared experiences. These are the interactions that actually recharge your social battery instead of draining it. And perhaps most importantly, redefine what it means to be productive with your time. Rest, reflection, and solitude are not wasted time. They are the foundation that allows everything else to function properly. Without them, you're operating on borrowed energy. The goal isn't to disconnect from the modern world entirely. That's neither realistic nor necessary. The goal is to create a rhythm that your brain can sustain, a balance between engagement and withdrawal, input and processing, connection and solitude. Because at the end of the day, your social battery isn't meant to be constantly full. It's meant to be used, depleted, and recharged in cycles. But when those cycles are disrupted, when there's no clear boundary between on and off, everything starts to blur. Energy drains faster than it can recover, and what you're left with is that familiar sense of being tired without knowing why. So the next time you feel that exhaustion creeping in after hours of scrolling or constant digital interaction, don't dismiss it. Don't label it as laziness. Recognize it for what it is, a signal. Your brain is asking for something it's not getting. Not more stimulation, not more connection, but less. Less noise, less pressure, less input. And when you start listening to that signal, when you begin to give your mind the environment it actually needs, something shifts. The fatigue doesn't disappear overnight, but it starts to make sense. And once it makes sense, you can do something about it. Because reclaiming your energy isn't about doing more, it's about removing what was never meant to be there in the first place. And in that space you create, quiet, intentional, uninterrupted, you don't just recharge, you reconnect, not with the world, but with yourself. And that's the kind of energy that actually lasts.